She was laughing loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear her. The woman with the honey-colored highlights and the silk blouse unbuttoned one button too many, holding court with 4 people who all had very important business cards and very uncertain expressions. And on her lapel, catching the afternoon light from the floor-to-ceiling windows that faced Bay Street, was a silver and tourmaline starburst pin that Isolde Carmichael recognized before she had even properly focused on it. She was seated 2 tables away, finishing her salad. Her fork did not clatter, her expression did not change. She simply looked at the pin for precisely as long as it took to be certain, and it took about 3 seconds, because she had grown up looking at that piece of jewelry on her grandmother's lapel in every photograph that mattered, in every published spread in Canadian Interiors from 1962 onwards, in the framed print above her own desk at the office. She had built from nothing. And then she set her fork down gently, placed her linen napkin beside her plate, reached for her water glass, and took one slow, deliberate sip. Before we go any further, if you're watching this from somewhere in Canada right now, drop your city in the comments below. I genuinely want to see how far this story reaches. And if this is your first time here at Ivory Secrets, hit subscribe and stay until the very end. Because what Isolde does next is not something you will forget. The woman's name was Lena Briggs. She was 28 years old, had been working at Carmichael Interiors for 11 months as the firm's newly appointed creative director, a title Isolde had not been consulted about and had only discovered on the firm's website 3 weeks after it had already been changed. Lena was telling the people around her table about what she called the Dalhousie method, a philosophy of spatial design that Isolde's grandmother, Edith Dalhousie, had pioneered in her Montreal atelier in the early 1960s, and that Isolde had spent 20 years honoring and extending into one of Canada's most respected interior architecture firms. Lena was describing it as though she had thought of it herself. She was using phrases like my philosophy and the vision I've brought to the firm. Isolde listened for 40 seconds. Then she paid her bill, walked to the lobby, and called Quentin Fairbairn, her family's solicitor of 19 years, from the revolving door. "Quentin," she said, when he answered on the second ring, "I need you to pull every document that has Clifford's signature on it from the last 18 months. Anything related to the firm, the trademark, the Dalhousie archive. I need it on my desk by tomorrow morning." She paused. "And I need you to be very quiet about it." He was quiet for a moment. "Isolde, how bad is it?" "I don't know yet," she said. "That's why I'm calling you first." She hung up. She stood in the cold November air outside, Toronto's particular November, the kind that makes everything look like a decision that hasn't been made yet, and she breathed in twice. Then she went back to the office, sat down at her desk, below the framed photograph of her grandmother, and she began to work. She was 47 years old. She had survived the collapse of her first business at 31, had rebuilt from a single contract in a Cabottown walk-up at 33, had taken on her first major institutional project at 36, and had not stopped since. Carmichael Interiors now employed 62 people, had completed projects in 7 provinces, and was shortlisted for the Whitfield Design Prize, Canada's most distinguished award in interior architecture, for the 4th consecutive year. The firm's entire identity rested on the methodological foundation Edith Dalhousie had built, the conviction that a room should feel like the people who live in it, not the architect who designed it. Edith had never been famous outside design circles. She had never sought it. She had worn the same silver and tourmaline starburst brooch, 4 stones, one for each house she had designed in her first decade, to every significant presentation she had ever given, because she believed that the details you carry with you are the ones that root you when everything else shifts. Isolde had inherited the brooch when Edith died 15 years ago. She had last seen it pinned to the lapel of her blazer hanging on the office coat hook. She had left it there on a morning when Clifford had been alone in the building before she arrived. The documents Quentin sent her the following morning were precise, legal, and devastating. Over 14 months, Clifford Carmichael had quietly engaged a separate lawyer to incorporate a new entity, Carmichael Creative Inc., registered federally with himself, and Lena Briggs listed as joint directors. He had then filed to transfer the firm's founding trademark, including the registered name Dalhousie Method, which Isolde had trademarked in her grandmother's honor 20 years ago, to this new company. He had also arranged for the original Dalhousie archive to be reclassified from firm asset to personal property, which, under the terms of a shareholder agreement he had quietly revised, would allow him to remove it from Carmichael Interiors' protected holdings. The intent was clear once you knew to look. Carmichael Creative was being built in parallel to Carmichael Interiors, a version of the firm without Isolde, branded with her grandmother's name and philosophy, ready to launch. The moment Clifford decided the timing was right. The trademark filing had been approved 3 weeks ago. He was simply waiting. Isolde read every page. She read them the way she read blueprints. Not quickly, but completely, so that the shape of the thing settled in her body, and not just in her mind. Then she sat with her hands flat on the desk for a long moment. She thought about 23 years. She thought about the man who had told her, when they first launched Carmichael Interiors together, that he believed in her more than he believed in anything. She thought about the way he had said her grandmother's name with what she had taken then to be genuine reverence. She thought about the 14 months he had spent quietly building his exit. She had loved him. She wanted to be clear about that, even sitting alone in the office with the documents in front of her. She did not intend to lose sight of the fact that what she had felt had been real, but she also understood with the steady clarity of someone who had survived genuine difficulty before, that the reality of what you felt does not obligate you to let someone take everything from you. She intended to take everything back. She called Millicent Oakes. Millicent was 71, had been practicing design since before Isolde was born, and was the person most responsible for the Whitfield Prize existing at all. She had been Edith Dalhousie's closest colleague, and, after Edith's death, had become the person Isolde called when she needed someone who would not flinch, and would not waste time on outrage when there was strategy to be done. "I've been wondering when you'd call," Millicent said, before Isolde had finished her first sentence. "You knew?" "I suspected. 3 months ago, Clifford asked me very casually at the Arts and Letters dinner whether the Whitfield Committee had any concerns about awarding a prize to a firm in transition. I told him the committee awards prizes to the work, not the business structure, but I thought about it afterward." A pause. "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." "You're saying something now," Isolde said. "That's what I need." She told Millicent everything: the archive reclassification, the trademark filing, Lena Briggs at Café Boulud, describing the Dalhousie method as her own vision, the Brooch. Millicent was quiet in the way that meant she was building something. "The Whitfield Gala is in 8 days, she said finally. "Clifford has already confirmed his attendance. He'll bring her." "I know," Isolde said. "You want to do it there." "I want to do it there," Isolde confirmed. A shorter pause. "Then I'll need to make a few calls." There was a particular satisfaction in his voice, the specific warmth of someone who has been waiting a long time for the right kind of problem. "The seating committee owes me considerably more than a favor, and Morale Hargrove will be at the gala regardless. She covers the Whitfield for both the Globe and Decene, but where she stands in the room matters." "Make the calls," Isolde said. "Done," Millicent said. "Now the brooch." "I'll retrieve it tomorrow morning," Isolde said, "before he comes in." "Good." A pause. "And Isolde, wear it. Don't conceal it. The people in that room will know exactly what they're looking at." Edith wore it at the 78 Whitfield presentation. There are photographs in the archive. "I know," Isolde said quietly. "I have them." She retrieved the brooch at 7 in the morning. It was in the drawer of Clifford's credenza, in a cloth pouch she recognized from her grandmother's jewelry box. She held it for a moment, the slight asymmetry of the tourmalines, the particular weight of the silver, the way it caught whatever light was available, and returned it differently, and felt something move through her chest that had no precise name. Not rage, not grief. Something older and quieter than both. The steady, cold clarity of a woman who has finally looked directly at the thing she has been preparing herself to see. She put it in her coat pocket. She went back to work. Quentin rang at noon. The trademark filing, he said, was almost certainly voidable. Clifford had acted without full board disclosure and without Isolde's co-signature, which the original shareholder agreement required for any intellectual property transaction above a defined threshold. He was also preparing a full civil claim covering breach of fiduciary duty and misappropriation of assets. File the challenge Monday, Isolde said, after the gala. Isolde, that's 8 days from now. I'm aware of that, Quentin. A pause. All right, Monday morning. One more thing. I need a summary, clear, factual, no editorial language, of the Carmichael creative filing and what it represents. Prepared for a board member, not a court. By when? End of the week. She hung up. She made herself eat lunch, a sandwich, at her desk, and she looked at the city, through her office window, and thought about what Clifford had believed he was doing. He had believed he was preparing for an inevitable outcome. He had told himself the story that people tell themselves when they have already decided what they want and need the decision to feel reasonable. He had been patient. He had been methodical. He had spent 14 months moving things carefully so that when he eventually left, she would have less than she had started with. He had made one specific, fatal error. He had confused her composure for unawareness. He was about to understand the difference. On the afternoon of the gala, her phone rang from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. Something made her pick up. Is this Isolde Carmichael? The voice was young. Careful in the way a voice is careful when someone is trying very hard not to sound frightened. Isolde went still. Who is this? A pause. My name is Lena Briggs. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Isolde waited. I know you have no reason to want to hear from me, Lena said. And I'm not calling to apologize, exactly, because I don't think an apology from me would mean much to you right now. But I need to ask you something. Then ask it. The brooch in your office, the silver pin, Clifford told me it was a sample piece from an old supplier, that it wasn't being used. He said I could wear it to industry events to represent the firm's aesthetic. A pause. That's not true, is it? It was not quite a question. Isolde said nothing. Mrs. Carmichael? It belonged to my grandmother, Isolde said. Her voice was even. She wore it to every significant presentation she gave for 27 years. It was photographed in every major design publication in Canada between 1962 and 1989. It is not a supplier sample. It is not something Clifford had any authority to give to anyone. She paused. He told you what was convenient. The silence stretched. When Lena spoke again, the careful composure had given way to something rawer. I didn't know. About the pin. I swear I didn't know what it was. I believe you, Isolde said, and she did, which was its own kind of complicated. What about the rest of it? Lena asked. The trademark, the archive. Did you know he'd filed to transfer them? I know now. Another silence. He told me it was being restructured for the firm's benefit, Lena said, quietly, that it would protect the intellectual property from any shareholder disputes. He said you'd agreed in principle. He said that a lot, actually, that you'd agreed, that you understood, that you were comfortable with the direction. A pause. He said it enough times that I stopped asking. Isolde thought about the specific architecture of 14 months of deception, the patience it required, the care. She thought about what it meant that a man had spent that much time and intelligence moving in a direction that required this much careful, sustained dishonesty. And she thought that what she found most difficult was not the betrayal itself, but the patience of it. The fact that all of it had been spent taking from her, rather than building anything worth keeping. There's something else, Lena said. I found out yesterday. A document was sent to the wrong email. address, the actual structure of Carmichael Creative. He holds controlling interest. My name is on the directorship because it gives the company credibility in the industry. But the financial control is entirely his. A pause. He was using me too, I just didn't know it yet. Isolde was quiet for a moment. Come to the gala tonight, she said. Wear the brooch. A sharp intake of breath. What? Wear it. Come with Clifford as planned. When the moment comes, let me handle the rest. Why would you? Because what happens tonight needs to happen in front of the people who need to see it, Isolde said. And because what he did to me, he was doing to you as well in different ways with different tools. But he did it to both of us. A very long silence, then quietly, all right. Isolde hung up. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hand. She had not planned Lena Briggs. She had not planned this phone call. But she had learned, across 20 years of design work, that the best outcomes are never the ones that go exactly as drawn. They are the ones that absorb the unexpected and become more coherent because of it. She stood up. She went to dress. The Whitfield Design Prize Gala was held at the Gardner Museum, a building Isolde had always respected for the way it held its seriousness without ostentation, the way it let its collections do the speaking. She arrived precisely when she intended, in the quiet 10 minutes after the entrance rush, when the photographers were still present, but the crowd had thinned to something manageable. She wore a structured charcoal wool dress, nothing theatrical, nothing that announced itself from across the room. She did not need the dress to do that work. The brooch was pinned at her left lapel, and the silver and 4 tourmalines caught the light from the museum's entrance canopy in a way that drew several glances before people had even looked at her face. She had expected that Muriel Hargrove was positioned near the interior entrance. They made eye contact for half a second and communicated everything that needed to be communicated. Millicent found her within a minute, midnight blue as always, moving with the unhurried authority of someone for whom this room has never been unfamiliar territory. He arrived 22 minutes ago, Millicent said quietly, falling into step beside her. He spoke to the event coordinator about the seating arrangement. She told him the chart was fixed and smiled at him in a way that closed the discussion entirely. He is at table 11. And Lena? Table 9, close enough that anyone paying attention will understand the geography. Far enough that the distance tells its own story. A pause. She's wearing the brooch. I know, Isolde said. The 1978 Whitfield photograph is on the committee's heritage display along the south wall, Millicent continued. The rotating exhibit, Edith's face and the pin. I arranged for it to be included in this evening's heritage display. It has been there since 6 o'clock. Isolde looked at her. Millicent. I have known Edith's work for 50 years, Millicent said simply. It belonged there. I simply made certain it arrived tonight. She paused. Now go sit down, the room is already watching. Isolde found her table, the committee table, center of the room, from which she could see every other table, and every table could see her. She knew the people around her, had worked alongside most of them, trusted several of them, without needing it explained. She looked across the hall to table 9. Lena Briggs was already seated, 28 years old, in a room full of people who had been working in her field since before she was born, holding a particular stillness that Isolde recognized as the stillness of someone who has made a very large decision and is carrying it in their body while everything around them continues. Normally, the brooch was at her lapel. The tourmalines caught the gallery light. Lena looked up and found Isolde's eyes across the distance between them. Isolde looked at her steadily for a moment, not warmly, not unkindly, and then looked away. She picked up her water glass. She turned to Noel Alderton on her left, who had been designing buildings in Vancouver for 30 years and had a laugh like a door being opened into a warm room. And she said, Noel, tell me what happened with the Granville Harbor Heritage variant. You mentioned it at the October symposium, and I never got to hear the rest. And she listened. The room moved through dinner. Isolde ate, talked, listened. She tracked Clifford at table 11, with the peripheral precision of someone who has spent 2 decades learning how spaces and people interact, who moves toward what, who shifts away from whom, what the body communicates before the mind has caught up. He was looking at her and then looking away, calculating something each time, and each calculation was arriving at an answer he didn't have a use for. He had not planned for this. He had planned for a gala at which Isolde would be present. But peripheral. Managed at a careful distance, there enough to prevent questions, but far enough from the center to allow him to introduce Lena to the right people and begin quietly repositioning the firm's identity. He had not planned for her at the committee table. He had not planned for the brooch. He had not planned for any of this. She found that, despite everything, almost interesting. At 9:40, the Whitfield committee chair, Laurent Beaumont, a Montreal architect who had known Isolde for 15 years, opened the award proceedings. 2 prizes were presented. The room applauded. Then Laurent said, "Before we come to the evening's principal award, I'd like to invite someone to speak about the heritage of Canadian design that this prize exists to honor and extend. Many of you know her work. What you may not know is the depth of the lineage behind it." Isolde Carmichael. He had used her name only. He had not needed to say anything more. She walked to the lectern. She placed her hands at its edges lightly. The room arranged itself around her attention. She looked out at it. She found Mireille Hargrove near the east pillar, recorder raised. She found Millicent, seated, watching with the contained satisfaction of someone who has spent 3 weeks building a moment and intends to be fully present for every second of it. She found Lena at table 9, hands folded in her lap, completely still. She found Clifford at table 11, and she watched him understand, in the span of about 3 seconds, that the evening had already moved beyond anything he could redirect. "My grandmother designed her first room in 1959, Isolde said. Her voice was even and unhurried, working from a 2-room studio on Saint-Denis in Montreal, with a philosophy she could not yet fully articulate, but that she spent the next 30 years making concrete. The idea was simple and was radical, in the way that simple ideas often are, that a room should reflect the people who inhabit it. Not the architect, not the trend, not the era, the people." She paused. She called it, eventually, the Dalhousie method. "It is the foundation of everything I have built." The room was very quiet. She wore this brooch. Isolde touched it lightly at her lapel. To every significant presentation she gave for 27 years, it became her signature. The people who worked alongside her knew what it meant when they saw it. It meant she was fully present. It meant the work was real. She paused. "I'm telling you this tonight because I believe the Whitfield Prize exists for exactly this reason, to remember that the best work we do does not belong to a filing, or a corporate structure, or a company name. It belongs to the thinking behind it, to the hands that formed it, to the lineage that made those hands capable of forming it." A pause. "And I'm telling you, because this community, this particular gathering of people who have given their working lives to making spaces worthy of the people who inhabit them, deserves to know what I intend to protect, and to know that I intend to protect it." She straightened slightly. "Carmichael Interiors will be renamed. Effective Monday, the firm will operate as Dalhousie Carmichael Design. My grandmother's name, first, as it should have been from the beginning." The applause started at the committee table and moved outward across the room, like something that had been waiting to happen. Isolde stepped back from the microphone. She did not look at table 11. She walked back toward her seat, at the pace she had decided on before she had ever entered the building, that evening, unhurried, without performance, the pace of someone who has already arrived. She heard Clifford's chair behind her. He crossed the room in a way she tracked by sound and by the adjustments in the conversations around her, table by table, each small silence marking his approach. He came around to her left side. She acknowledged him when she was ready to. "That wasn't necessary," he said. His voice was controlled, very controlled, the voice of a man gripping the last intact thing he has. "I disagree," she said pleasantly. "Isolde, we should speak outside." "We shouldn't," she said, at a register that the people immediately around her could hear clearly, if they chose. Everything that needed to be said has been said. Quentin will call your solicitor Monday morning. The trademark challenge is prepared. The board has been briefed. I spoke to 3 members this week individually. She paused. I'd recommend your solicitor take the call. He looked at her. In that look she saw something she had not quite expected. Not fury, not desperation, but a kind of inventory. A man taking stock of losses in real time. And underneath it, something that looked, briefly, like the recognition of how catastrophically he had miscalculated the most fundamental thing. Not the legal exposure, not the timing, but her. What she was capable of. What she had always been capable of. The archive, he started. Belongs to the firm, she said. The founding documents have always been clear on that point, and they will be clear on Monday morning as well. She held his gaze. I think you should go home, Clifford, tonight. And I think, if you are as intelligent as you have always believed yourself to be, you will understand that what happens next depends entirely on how cooperative you choose to be. He looked at the room. She watched him read it, the faces, the postures, the expressions of 60 people who had just witnessed everything that had happened and had already formed their conclusions. She watched him understand that there was no story left to manage here. No narrative to shape. The story had already been told from a microphone by a woman in a charcoal dress with her grandmother's brooch at her lapel, and it had been told clearly. He left without another word. She watched him cross the room. The walk was controlled, but it cost him. She watched him hand his ticket to the coat attendant at the far door and step through it into the night. The room exhaled, not loudly, not all at once, but in the way a room releases tension when something has been decided and the deciding is over. Millicent's hand found hers under the table, a brief, firm pressure, not sympathy, confirmation. 20 minutes later, Lena Briggs walked across the room. She moved with the deliberate pace of someone executing a decision before they can think their way out of it. She stopped 2 feet from where Isolde was sitting. She reached up and unclasped the brooch from her lapel. Her hands were steady. She held it out. The silver and the 4 tourmalines resting in her palm, catching the gallery light. This belongs to you, Lena said. It always did. The room had gone to the particular quality of silence that has nothing to do with politeness and everything to do with people understanding that something genuine is happening and choosing to witness it properly. I'm not doing this for him, Lena continued. Her voice had gone slightly unsteady at the edges, the first visible sign of what this was costing her. And I'm not doing it for you, exactly. I'm doing it because I don't want to be someone who kept something that wasn't hers because it was easier not to ask the right questions. A pause. And because you were right this afternoon. What he did to you, he was doing to me as well. He just hadn't gotten to the part where I'd know yet. Isolde looked at the brooch in Lena's palm for a moment. Then she reached out and took it. The weight of it was familiar in a way that went far past the physical. The weight of her grandmother, in every room she had ever walked into with full conviction. The weight of every presentation Edith had given in 27 years of wearing this exact piece. The weight of everything it meant to have built something real and to still be standing in front of it. Thank you, Isolde said quietly. Lena nodded once. She turned and walked back across the room without pausing, straight-backed, deliberate, the walk of someone who has done a difficult thing and is carrying it correctly. Isolde watched her go and felt, unexpectedly and without reservation, a kind of respect that required no qualification. Mireille got the photograph, Millicent said quietly. She was positioned perfectly. I know, Isolde said. A pause. Then Millicent's voice shifted, still precise. Still Millicent, but underneath it something that had known Isolde for 23 years and was not performing anything at all. How are you? Isolde closed her fingers around the brooch. She felt its full weight. Not just silver and tourmaline, but her grandmother in a Montreal studio in 1959, and in every room after that, and in the photograph on the south wall of this museum that Millicent had placed there tonight, so that everyone in this room would know exactly what they were looking at when they looked at it. I'm all right, she said, And she meant it in the way that is only available on the other side of something you have done, as cleanly as it could be done. She drove home through Toronto at 11:30, the city in its particular late November condition, wet pavement reflecting streetlights, the lake, somewhere south of everything, the skyline simply existing, with the unapologetic solidity of a place that has never been interested in being anything other than itself. She held the brooch in her right hand for most of the drive. She let the evening settle. Her phone buzzed as she turned onto her street. Gala, her daughter, in Vancouver, who had called twice already, and left voicemails that both began with, "Mom, I've been watching the Whitfield stream." She answered. "Mom." Gala's voice had the quality of someone who has been awake for 2 hours, processing something, and has arrived at the phone call as the only next logical step. "I saw the speech. Mireille Hargrove already posted the clip. It's Mum. It's everywhere. And the brooch. Grand's brooch. I could see it from the stream." A pause. "Are you okay? Like actually okay? Not the version of okay you tell me so I don't worry." Isolde thought about how to answer that honestly. "I'm the kind of okay that costs something," she said, "which is the only kind worth being." A silence, then quietly, "I'll book my train." She hung up. She sat in the dark car, in her own driveway for a moment, the city, quiet around her, and let the weight of the evening settle into something she could carry forward, rather than something she needed to put down. Monday morning, Quentin filed the trademark challenge at 9:15. By 10, Clifford's solicitor had returned the call. By 11, there was a preliminary agreement to enter mediated negotiations, which Quentin read correctly as the signal that Clifford's legal position was precisely what it had always been: untenable. Mireille Hargrove's piece ran in Tuesday's edition. It was careful and factual and did not editorialize, because it did not need to. The facts, set out in Mireille's precise, unhurried prose, were entirely sufficient. There was a photograph of Isolde at the lectern, with the brooch clearly visible at her lapel, and in the background, on the museum's heritage display wall, Edith Dalhousie, in 1978, at a Whitfield presentation wearing the same piece. The caption read, "Some legacies cannot be filed away." Isolde read the article at her desk, beneath the framed photograph of her grandmother that had hung there for 11 years. She read it twice. Then she opened her notebook, the physical moleskin she had kept since her 30s, in which she recorded only things she intended to build, and she turned to a new page. At the top she wrote, "Dalhousie Carmichael Design, What It Will Be," and she began. She was not at the end of anything. She understood that clearly and without qualification. Sitting at her desk, in the office she had built, with her grandmother's name written at the top of a clean page, and 62 people, somewhere in the floors below, who had come to work every morning and done their jobs honestly, and the clear November light coming through the windows, and a month of precision and composure behind her, and everything she intended to build still ahead. She had been making spaces for 20 years. She knew exactly what a foundation looked like, and she knew that the most important thing about a foundation was not that it survived what had been built on top of it, but that it was solid enough to hold whatever came next. She picked up her pen and she kept going.